Senator David Lent, you are back. You and I haven't spoken since the beginning of the legislative session, but you are back now.
I am back, and it's a pleasure to be here. Here we are in summer, and things are going 100 miles an hour.
God, so funny you say that. I was burning all through the legislative session, doing, like upwards of 6 and 7 interviews a day, a dump truck. And I kept telling my wife, I'm like, it's only until the end of the legislative session. Then everything will calm down. And man, get out. I'm doing 10 interviews this week. It's not slowing down, man. Yeah. Good times.
It's really not. People don't realize that during the session, we're really, really busy. But out of session, if you're engaged working on projects, it's every day.
Yeah,
it's every day. I've got this interview today. I've got public building fund this afternoon, JLOC meeting after that, and then I'm going to Twin for another meeting tonight on my way home to Idaho Falls.
Good Lord, man, that's a lot. Well, listen, let's make this as least painful as possible. You are the chairman of the Senate Ed Committee. I actually had the good fortune of presenting to you this last legislative session, which was awesome. But you are traveling around the state talking about Idaho's public education system. Help me understand this.
Well, really, if you think about it, and I read this the other day, and it really struck home to me that it's been said that we are in a once-in-a-century point in time when it comes to education. If you think about it, I know you've had folks on here talk about the history of public education, the industrial model. We've talked about how technology has interfaced. I was a training manager at a nuclear facility when the internet and smartphones and all this came in. We saw this transition of the workforce. And then you get to the point where as all this is happening and we have this growing sentiment that public education is not really meeting the mark, kind of like you think back about the Sears of its day was the Amazon of our day.
Yeah, right.
And why is that not happening? And how many things in our day have kind of gone their way because they couldn't evolve and adapt?
Right.
Not that the needs of the customer changed. If you think about Sears and Amazon, they're still buying, what they want. The difference is the expectation of the customer. And in this case, the students and the parents and society in general has changed when it comes to education. Education has to evolve. And we are at a point. And what really was kind of the catalyst recently was COVID. Brought a lot of parents back to the education table thinking about what their kids are doing, the involvement there. So we really are, and I believe we are at a point in time where we have about 3 to 5 years to make significant evolution in public education. We have people in, I think, is it One Stone? Is that?
Yes, that's. I interviewed the director of that, Celeste Bowden, recently. Yes,
so they're an example of early adopters who are out there really making it. They're talking about competency-based training, engagement, relevance, self-direction. All those things are magic words that really we know what to do. The difference in our culture is, although we know what to do and we know which way to turn the ship basically continues down the same path. I talk a lot about this, the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln and how big it is and how it's one of the most sophisticated machines in the world and how long does it take to turn it around. And it's interesting when people find out that when everyone works together, you have a common vision and mission, that thing can change directions 180 degrees in 3 to 5 minutes. This is over 200 million pounds of iron and steel together. So
floating, by the way.
Oh, of course. So back to the point of what am I doing? We have created the Idaho Public Education Coalition, and it's based on Imagine Excellence. So what I'm doing is I'm traveling around the state, and I have a presentation that I make that really centers around, if we could, don't worry about funding, don't worry about regulatory issues. Let's just have the discussion about if we could reinvent education in Idaho today, what would it look like? And you have to kind of help people understand the structure that they bring to that about, we go to school for 9 months out of the year and we do this and we do that.
Right.
When you start erasing and dissolving that a little bit and you start talking about, let's not talk so much about innovative change because we've really struggled with that over the last 40, 50, 60 years, innovative change with No Child Left Behind, Common Core. We've been through all this, but it really didn't move the mark. What we're talking about here are not necessarily what you would consider innovative changes, but more disruptive change. And so when I talk in in terms of this is once in a century opportunity. This is when you bring in a disruptive change and say, it really does make more sense from a learning perspective to have kids in school year round in some sense. The model of, turning them out in the summer, why are we holding on to that? There's so many things that we know how to do it, but our system just has not evolved. So
may I ask a question? When you keep saying, and again, I don't disagree with you. You're like, look, we know what to do. Okay. And what I keep coming back to is, okay, can you make a Toyota Corolla go faster? Yeah. Yeah, we know what to do. Like, no problem. We can make Corolla go faster. Like, piece of cake, man. First off, put an RX on the back. That'll instantly make it go faster. Like, whatever you want, right? You can make the car go faster. But the question is, in what time frame and with what resources? Because that's when you look at the model like One Stone, right? Self-direction, innovation, like really individual-centered. Absolutely. These are things that you can do. And this is a conversation that I almost always end up in when I'm talking to people that are engaging in homeschooling. It's like, yeah, homeschooling can produce fantastic results. But let's start with the premise that you have one teacher for one student or one teacher for two students, right? That at scale doesn't work, right? And that's one problem that you run into instantaneously with that comparison. If you go further down that rabbit hole, it's okay, there are other educational systems that can produce fantastic results, but they produce fantastic results for parents that are well-heeled, right? So if I'm a child of a set of parents that are making, let's say, $500,000, I'm likely going to be getting meals, I'm getting safety, I'm getting security, I'm getting all of these things that enable me to be the type of person that can even absorb and then self-direct with an education.
Sure.
At scale, or public really means you're dealing with a kid whose parents maybe make 500 and you're dealing with a kid who's sleeping in a tent. So we know what to do. Yes. But in what time frame and with what resources is the question?
So great question. So here's a couple thoughts on that. You and I talked earlier about the difference between a short game and a long game.
Sure.
And having the opportunity to go to Finland and study their educational system pretty much top to bottom, they expressed that it took them about 10 years to really do the turnaround. And we need to think in those terms as well. So as I go across the state this summer and this fall, meeting with people, having this conversation, starting the vision to evolve about what it could be, the plan is to come back this fall with legislators, sit down and start formulating what we could do from a policy point of view. My intent is have legislation this spring, kind of jumping to the end here, that would have a 3-year, that would set up, we talked about early adopters, ask 5 public districts, varying sizes throughout the state, if they would step forward and be a pilot for us. The state's role here would be we would relax regulatory compliance issues with them. We would provide the funding that they think they would need to do this, to work with their communities and reinvent their public system with their community, and then have a 3-year pilot on that. That essentially would help us do what we hoped would happen with charter schools. And in the charter schools, what we've done is we've created another industry out here that's pretty much self-sufficient and hasn't created the innovation back to the public system that it was originally intended to. So the intent of this year-long, 2 or 3 year to kickstart this is to go back and say, how can we accelerate that change and innovation in the public system? And we're going to do that using public schools in Idaho and giving them the freedom to self-govern, letting them work with their students, their parents, and their community, because that local control is going to be the key here. One of the main things that we're suffering with in education in general is that lack of trust. Generally, people have lost trust. And you see this as school boards and superintendents react in ways that you say, why are they doing that? That makes no sense. That seems contrary to what's common sense. We see that happening. And so my call and when I was in Twin the other day, had mostly school board members there. And I said, here's my call to you, your call to action. Stand up, be a voice for integrity in your community. If you hear rumors that something's happening in your school and you say, oh, no, that doesn't happen here, you need to go out publicly in the media, wherever you go, and say that we have zero tolerance for that. Stand up and be heard and let people build that trust. You have to earn that back. So that's going to be an integral part as we rebuild our public system. The intent of what I'm trying to work on this summer and next spring will be to help our public schools be the school of choice in Idaho, so that people can rely on those. When I went to Finland, I said, you have private schools. Oh, yeah, we have private schools, and we have a certain amount of kids that go to them. But most parents prefer to send their kids to the public system because it's strong and they have trust and value in it. And I believe we can regain that in Idaho. And really, this isn't an issue. I said, it's not that we don't know what to do. We know how to manage, because we have defined success as test scores and this and that.
Sure.
The difference between getting from this point and connecting the dots is a simple word called leadership. And do we have the vision and then the leadership to move from one point to the other? And that's what it's going to take in our state is leadership. Nationally, that's the issue in education.
Okay. When we talk about, I'd like to go back, if I could, to talk about charter schools briefly. And you're saying essentially, look, the initial idea of the charter program was to essentially allow for innovation within the education system, publicly funded education system, and then figure out what the best system is, because these charter schools can go out, they can do things differently, they can engage the students and families and the curriculum differently, and we'll see if they come up with a better system that we could then take and then engineer into our public system. And you're saying that transition of, hey, you guys have created this innovative system, or you have adopted an innovative system that we collectively recognize objectively that it works, we'll integrate that into the public. That transition never happened, where you had successful charter schools that then transitioned their system into the neighborhood public school. That's essentially what you were saying with the charter schools? Yeah,
not to the scale that it was supposed to happen. I mean, you do see some of that happening, but as an example, Janie Ward-Engelking from the Senate side brought legislation this year that essentially would let public schools function under the same regulatory constraints as a charter school. And when you start thinking in those terms, when we're giving back local control to the districts, letting them have identity, letting them focus on what's important to their community, you start building that community trust back in the school system. So I think that's the answer here is we go back to local control. We relax the regulatory constraints, and we let them be accountable to their communities more. Even, again, we talk about once in a century kind of opportunity. Here we have all this happening at the same time at the federal level. We see this dissolving of the federal Department of Education with the idea that they would roll down in these block grants to the states. Great idea. And let's maybe even roll some of that down more locally and give our local folks more control financially.
Do you think there's a desire in the Idaho State Legislature to relax constraints on public dollars? I know obviously there was from a school choice standpoint, because the state legislator said, hey, zero accountability, zero recordation of what's actually happening aside from a receipt from a school. But we'll give you this $5,000. There was that with House Bill 93, and it passed. But at the same time, you had bills getting passed to increase regulation on the average public school, right? With increased cursive writing standards. So it's okay, first you want to give this money to people with no requirements, and then at the same time you want to continue layering on requirements to the public school. Do you think that there is a desire? Because if there was a will to reduce those constraints, it's almost like a chunk of money goes to the public schools. And in one side of your head, you're like, hey, that money, that's hard-earned tax dollars. And if we're going to offer out hard-earned tax dollars, man, we got to make sure they're being utilized at the best possible way. And we're going to layer on all these checks and balances and really make sure that every single penny, it goes to the right area. That's on one side of your brain. And then the other side of your brain is we're going to give out $5,000 of tax dollars, and we're just going to give it to them.
Yeah.
And if people like the way they're spending it, good for them. And if they don't like the way they're spending it, okay, that's it. But we don't need to know anything. So it's I don't understand these two systems. But the point is, it seems that there is a desire to reduce restrictions on public spending and education in one hand, and then there's an increased desire to increase the restrictions of public spending on the other hand.
So my call would be to all those people who voted for House Bill 93, the public spending on private and or religious schools, all those people who voted on that, you see a lot of those same people voting on the constraints that you're referring to.
Right. Increased cursive writing requirements.
Yeah. So argument, and I'll say the call that I have is to those legislators and to throughout the state, is that House Bill 93 came in, the school choice bill, with the concept, and it was basically preached that it would raise the level of all education in Idaho if we did this. So I'm going back to these legislators, and they're invited to these meetings. I had 5 or 6, I think I had 7 in Twin Falls come, and say, if you really hold to that, then let's go back now and let public education compete. Let's put public education in a place where it can compete. Right now it can't. The constraints, it's not even the same ball game between a regular public school and a private religious school under House Bill 93. Not even close. And we wonder why there's going to be a difference. And what will happen is we'll see a migration of those students whose parents are on top of it, figuring it out, to those private and or religious schools, and we'll see a concentration of issues on the public side, that division will grow. So that division that you're referring to between the legislators, it seems like it's a little bit hypocritical, in my opinion, that you do this. So I'm going back and saying, hey, if we really believe there's a difference, then it'll make public education better, then get on board. And let's start talking about what it's going to take to bring public education up on equal ground so they can compete.
Did you hear about the rash of special ed applications immediately following? So it was like, for people that don't know, it's the $5,000. You get $5,000 to go to like private school, but you get $7,500 if you have a special education student. And what happened immediately after that bill passed and was signed into law is people started having their kids going to the special ed assessment and saying, hey, my kid is special ed, because they felt, people in large numbers felt, hey, if I can get this kid to be qualified as special ed, I'll get $7,500 instead of the $5,000 for tuition for these private schools. Well, there are a couple problems with that. First off, even if you get the special ed qualification, the private schools don't have to take the kid. And if the private schools do take the student who's qualified as special ed, they have obligations to provide specific services for that student, which is a huge problem. They're like, look, I could get $5,000 with no obligation or no requirements at all, or I get the $7,500 from this family and I have all these requirements. Why don't I just not do that? And in my own education career, I saw people get kicked out of private schools because they're like, listen, we don't have the resources to help you. You need to go to the public school. They'll have the resources. And they didn't have it. It's not like, it was just like, hey, look, you're done here. Like, we don't have, you got to go away. It was like, guys, look, I understand that you're trying to work within the system to get more resources for your child, but this is not the way to do it. Not only that, once you're qualified as special education, that mark stays on your transcript forever. So it was, again, to your point, this short-term gain of I can get $7,500, but you're losing the long-term big picture, which is that the schools don't even have to take you, even if you get this, and this stays with your kid now that you have them designated as special ed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would refer your listeners to the recent article in Idaho Head News that they went to the tax commission and they took the average Idaho family, which the tax commission refers to as the Spud family, and they looked at 2 students and through there, and they showed taking advantage of the tax credit, how they actually make money.
When you say they make money,
well,
they?
People taking advantage of the tax credit.
Gotcha.
So when you start saying, I've got 2 students, I'm going to pull $10,000 out, and their state tax is less than that, you start seeing that they're paying less taxes across the board, not only for education, but things like transportation. That money's coming from somewhere. So it's really pulling from more money out of the state other than just the education picture. So, and here's my problem. I'm paying for that. My tax dollars are paying to send your kid to a private school. I didn't agree to that. I don't think I should have to pay for it. If you want your kid to go to a private school, great. Historically, that has worked very well in our country. If you want them to go to a private school, then you figure out a way to have them go there. But public schools in Idaho are not terrible. They're good, actually. You look at the NAEP scores, which are the national testing averages. Idaho will score at or above the national averages across the board. Our kids are holding in there. They're holding their own. And we do it at 60 cents on the dollar of the national average. So when you plug those 2 numbers together, you say, wow, we're getting really a good value in our state, what we pay for education. We're certainly not overpaying compared to the rest of the country, not even close. We know that already. So again, we know what to do. This is not a managing the process. What we have to do is redefine success. Success is not your ability to take a test and score on it. We already know that there's a certain amount of students that do well there. When I was back at the INL and we had our e-learning come out, we learned very quickly that there's certain employees that do very well on e-learning and certain employees that traditionally will not do very well on e-learning. So you have to accommodate that. So as we look at what education could be, we really talk about changing the whole picture and the role of the teacher. And I like to talk think in terms of an aircraft or how about an airport terminal? You have airplanes coming from all different directions, coming and going. And their job is to facilitate that safe, accommodate them as they come and go. So you've heard this before, but think in terms of a learning contract between a student, their parent or guardian, and the provider. And they really then have the opportunity to self-direct into what their interest is and move on through the system. So when a student graduates from 12th grade, instead of being handed a diploma that really is a ticket to poverty, you're barely going to be able, if that, support your family with that in our day. What if every student had a marketable skill? If they had the first level, either they had their associate degree or they had a entry-level marketable skill going out of the public system. So as you refer to $120,000 per student who graduates from high school in Idaho, that's value. Now we're really talking about return on investment. Right now, our system just assumes every kid's going to go to college and then here's the academics and away you go. And some kids do it. And then they get to college and we realize that the dropout rate through college is terrible. So we say, we've really created a system that's not a successful system. Let's have the leadership to say, stop. What is it? Stop the madness. Let's reinvent ourselves in a way that really brings not only efficiency, but effectiveness and value to our state and to our citizens.
And one additional piece on top of that, like if we talk about effectiveness and value and relevance and all these things, we have to be sitting at a table agreeing on metrics, like quantifiable metrics and value propositions that would justify spending in public education. We have to be engaged in that conversation, even to use those words. But what a lot of people are fighting against with public education is a just overwhelming distrust because they're no longer connected to the education system. They're no longer, you have people that believe there are, kitty litter boxes in the Middleton School District. Overwhelmingly not true. These people are not connected with the Middleton School District. They're connected in that they get to vote whether to pass a bond or not. Middleton just failed a bond for like a third time. And you had people with these ideas of what the school community was, what the school community is or is not doing. And with your idea, which is, hey, go to your community, bring the community in, reinvent your school system with the community. Look at the community and say, look, we have these 10,000 kids or we have these 5,000 kids. These are the resources we have. These are the properties we have. These are all these things. What do we want this to be? This is what it is, and this is what it's not. What shall we do? Connecting people in the community back to the education system, I think is the only way you're going to dispel the myths of what education systems are. And we all have worldviews of our localized area that are at least in some way persuaded by non-geographically relevant information, right? People in Middleton are anxious, at least to some portion of people in Middleton are anxious about the Middleton School District because of things they've seen online elsewhere. And that bleeds into their opinion. The only way to get them properly oriented back to what their schools, and maybe they're all right. Maybe there are kitty litter boxes and everybody's lying about it. And I don't know, maybe they're really good at hiding them when people go to take a picture of them. It's but the only way to get to the point where the community believes back in education is to connect people back to the educators in the education community and wrap everybody in it together, right? You'll still have some people who, have differing opinions about how education should be administered. Sure. And that's really important. We should have that conflict. But in the absence of that connection, you're always going to have people that are dissenting votes or against public education for reasons that public education in Idaho does not warrant.
Oh, absolutely. So an old principle is when you engage the folks in the solution, they have ownership. when you disengage them, I remember when I first went on the school board, I would invite people to school board member meetings, and they would say, well, it's no good. They don't listen to you. It's not worth our time to go in. What's happened is we've created a system that has a lot of boxes that we check. We hold a school board meeting. We do this thing called strategic planning in the districts. They'll tell you we already do this. It's not effective. What's happening is not really making the mark that it was intended to make. The kind of community discussion we're having is a whole different thing. If your school district is identified, let's say, we'll pick one, let's say Ryrie School District in eastern Idaho, 200-300 kids in their school district. They're picked as one of the 5. That becomes a community issue. Now the community now recognizes that something has happened. They're different, and they have an opportunity to be leaders in the state. They come together. It's going to take that kind of change. And again, I want to emphasize, we have to redefine what success is. And the community needs to help redefine that success. We have gone down this road that it's defined by a test and a grade. When you start saying, the grading system, the current, I don't know if many people realize, but we had universities and colleges before we had high schools in this country. High schools came in because they wanted, at the turn of the century, only about 20% of the kids were, it's 8%, I believe, were graduating from high school. And that has progressed up to about 80%. And the challenge is that 80% came in the 60s. It's still at 80%. We've plateaued there. We really haven't evolved in a way to engage and bring relevance. The secret sauce is engage those students. We all know that if you can, again, we know this stuff. If you help a student find their spark in junior high, find that spark and let them run hard and as deep as they can, and you add in the fundamental knowledges as they go. It's kind of like when we created Compass Academy there in Idaho Falls when we took a junior high and turned it into a project-based high school. You help students, and our state, where I think we really can make the changes as we go back to middle school, and we spend a lot of time helping them figure out what they like. Right now, we do very little, and it's kind of token. And we wonder why they graduate from high school and walk across the stage and say, I guess I better figure out what I'm going to do. They should know that if we're really going to be effective, we can do that by helping them chart a path. It's interesting, when I was in Finland, they were talking about a lot of kids, it's common to spend 13 years in K-12 because in high school, they switch and they have to go back and take, to transfer from one thing. It's like credits in college in a way. But it's a real common thing. But at the end of the day, they actually leave that public system with tangible items that help them contribute not only to society, but contribute to have a great family life that helps them, go on.
Yeah, I mean, and this comes down to teaching people to fish. We just all need to get on the same page with what the fishing looks like, right? And are we effectively teaching people to do this? At the end of the day, there is real value in having an educated populace at 18 that has a value proposition to the world. I can do this thing. I can offer you this thing, or I want to continue working in this field where I produce this thing, right? That's the whole nature of fishing. I can pull fish out of the water. This thing of value appears from the end of this line, right? I can do that. And if we don't offer that to people, right, we're all dead. Right? Everybody's going to go home hungry. And again, if the community comes together, it's okay, these 5 things, this would appear to be successful fishing to us. Mm-hmm. This would appear to be successful production of something to us. Okay, great. Then the community has said, this is what we want, and this is how we can get it. And then boom, everybody's happy with it.
These are our kids.
Right.
We're the parents. We should be in charge, right? Give them the voice in that. It's a great thing. So what I'm doing this summer and traveling around the state, it's a place to have the conversation to start that happening.
I love that.
It's really a movement. And it starts out slow, but it builds when people start realizing and talking about, well, it really could be different. Let's change our conversation from complaining about how bad it is to what could it be? And how do we get from A to B? And do we have the right people elected to do that? Are we talking about the right kind of things in the legislature that have that vision to get us there? Or are we still stuck on some of these issues that we have a lot of energy and conversation about during the session. Right. They're important, but that's kind of short game stuff. And really, that's a
Band-Aid. That's Band-Aid stuff.
And it's a lot of local control stuff. You've got elected officials to handle that. That's their job. And the more we as a state try to regulate and control locally, the more we contribute to the problem. So I say the time has come. We're at once-in-a-century opportunity. Let's really be brave here, and let's be leaders, and let's step out and say, it can be different. What does it take? And let's go after it. Even if you understand the concept of failing forward, I mean, you shoot for the top of the trees and you end up somewhere in there, but we have to make a change. When we talk about what's happening in the world, an example, if electric energy is the new oil, and you and I were talking about China has 29 commercial nuclear reactors under construction, and electric energy is going to drive the knowledge industry as we move from the industry economy to a knowledge economy. And I drove by Micron out there and I saw those and I thought, that's the factory, so to speak, and it's so different than the auto workers of the 20s, 30s, 40s. Right. It's a whole different thing. And the people who are going to work there, they need a different kind of preparation to be there. Coming from business and industry as a training, like I was like a superintendent in a corporate setting, I really struggled because I felt like we had to make up for a lot of the things they weren't getting in the public system. And I really didn't have that input that I wanted back to the public system. To say, no, here's the profile. As a community and at the INL, here's what we need our workers to have. I didn't feel like I had that input. And I was on the school board there at the same time. So that has helped drive my passion to this more disruptive type change, because I think that's what it's going to take.
Do you have a tour schedule? Like if for people hearing this throughout the state, like when are you, I know you're going around, but how can people be engaged in this type of conversation with you?
Well, we have a website called idahoed.com. And there's also a survey. I don't remember the website for that right off the bat, but if you go to idahoed.com, you'll see the Imagine Excellence. And that's the theme is imagine what it could be. Sure. Let's paint the picture, and then let's start talking about what it would take for us to get there. And I know I'm going to be in the Treasure Valley a couple of times. I know one this fall, but perhaps earlier I'll set up a couple more to come over and do these conversations. It is so fun to go and see people start lighting up about, what if we did this, or what if we did this, or, what if we redefined success for our schools in this way? And we kind of left behind some of those constraints, that box. So what if we took the box of education and said, it could really be a ball?
Listen, I want to come. Okay. I want to come do it. I want to come engage in the conversation. I really, really like this. I've been in education my entire career, and I think you guys are onto something. I know you're on a time schedule today. Is there anything you'd like to add here at the end?
No, I just appreciate what you do. You have great respect. People like coming here and talking to you. I really appreciate your insight in education. It's really important to me to talk to folks who really have that vision and looking forward, because that's what it's going to take. So thank you for allowing me to come.
Hey, anytime, man. I love it. Okay. Let's do it again.
Okay, thanks.